Will somebody open us in prayer today? I'll have a volunteer.
Father, we are grateful, Lord, for, Lord, the light of your life. Lord, the light that we can see, Lord, through darkness, Lord, and through, Lord, times of trial, Lord, and of different circumstance. Lord, that we can hold, Lord, a standard in our own hearts and minds. Lord, and we can know true joy, Lord, and true peace, Lord, amidst, Lord, the things of life. I pray that you would continue to teach us, Lord, how to find rest in you and how to, Lord, not be so concerned, Lord, with lower things, Lord, but keep our vision high and, Lord, our minds submitted to you, Lord. Lord, that we would not think too much, Lord, in a way that's unhelpful, but learn to be, Lord, led by your Spirit, Lord, in our lives and in our days. Lord, and be, Lord, careful and aware, Lord, of where we go to, Lord, and what we do and what we say, Father. Lord, I do thank you that you are teaching us, Lord, through our daily life. Father, that you are walking with us, Lord, step by step. Lord, that work is undeniable. Lord, we see it in one another. And Lord, through one another, you are helping it be made known, Lord, in our own lives. I thank you for that connection, Lord, and I pray for further unity, Lord, in those areas, that we would be open, Lord, before you, that we wouldn't close ourselves off because of, Lord, what we carry or what we experience, Lord, but that we would be able to discipline, Lord, our hearts, to, Lord, be teachable, Lord, and not be closed off, Lord. Thank you for this time and for each heart here, and I pray that you would, Lord, bless it, bless the things that we read, Lord, and I ask, Lord, that you would inspire good conversation and good fellowship with one another. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Benji. Well, before we read 14:7, I hope that the things that we discuss here are of practical use to you. So, ladies, you guys don't interject much. And so my hope is that this is still something that you are processing in your mind and heart as a means of how to practically use the wisdom that is shared and discussed in this time in your daily life. And for all of us, you know, there's so much about life, especially in the way that God ordained life to be, that is not just connected to, but the very essence of it is related to proper governance. And that's another fascinating parallel between Confucian philosophy or thinking about life is one, it's not individualistic. It's always communal. And that is the parallel there is very much the way that God dispensed his own authority and governance in the midst of his people. The leaders that he appointed were always to be communally minded and not individually minded. And that is a principal theme throughout the Old and New Testament. And so, and if you read through the law, you will find that the majority of the law is about keeping in right relationships. So the sacrificial system was put in a place for a season appointed by God to maintain proper relationship with a holy God. And Christ fulfilled that, and now we are living sacrifices. So it was pointing to a spiritual reality. Typically we think in the inverse. We think that the present sensible life is the true reality, and that the spiritual stuff is some other. We may not say this, but it's the way that we think most of the time and operate, but we think of it as a lesser reality because it's unseen. But that is simply not the truth. Not only is that which is unseen the eternal, but it is of greater consequence and import to us. I think that much that we even with the teachings that we've been going through with the elementary doctrines are to better enable or position God's people not just to understand with their mind, but to begin to operate in a spiritual reality. And that is a very difficult thing for people to do. It seems far too ethereal. It's like in the air, you can't grasp it. And that's actually true, but that doesn't mean that it is unattainable. However, it's not attainable through personal gifting, ability, attribute. It is only attainable by God's grace through faith. So, but it still in that realm comes to, if you boil it down, what is so much of the real essence of what is here is about proper governance. So even when there is new life in the Spirit, and you see this same parallel in the things that Confucius has shared, but in spiritual rebirth or new birth, there is a new governance, okay? And that starts from the inner man. So when someone asks the teacher, how do I change the world, basically, well, he says, start right here. And actually that's where God starts, is where with the renewal or the quickening of the spirit man and that inner place within you. And then the renewal goes from there beyond. And it's not just a stepped work, it's something that is synchronized in a sense and incremental, but it happens at the same time as well. So, but there is an order to it from the inside out. So spirit, soul, and flesh. And so proper governance is, and then, from there, you have the governance of yourself, and then you have the governance of your household, and you have the governance of your greater extended family and relational network, and then ultimately that goes to communities and townships and states and nations. But it all begins in the same disciplined mindset, trained, instructed way of wisdom is applied at every single level. And so proper governance is always applicable to every season of life, every situation of life, every location you can find yourself in. There just has to be a discernment for proper appropriation of how that is met out in you first and through you where you're at, according to the appointment that has been given to you, or the grace that has been given to you. And that changes depending on where you're at. So we can see that principally here, where Confucius, in speaking with his disciples, many of whom were ministers to greater authorities. So not many of these young men were the rulers themselves, but they were appointed to be advisors or ministers in their midst for the sake of a greater purpose, that being the people that they reigned and ruled with. And all with a mutual recognition that the grace that they had received for this appointment in governance or leadership was given from above. Those are really fascinating parallels. So again, that's why we look at these things, not because we subscribe to everything that they believe in their perspective, but there are principles that are direct parallels to ways of proper governance. And there's indications that we've discussed previously that these things were likely divinely inspired. And no, I'm not comparing Confucius' writings or conversations to the Bible, so don't let the hairs on the back of your neck go too far out. But there are some very valuable parallels, and as we've mentioned before, these are put in very practical settings that were real. These were historical events. And so, proper governance is a major thing in life. Every situation has there's an application for proper governance, whether that is of self or from self to those further rings of interaction and influence. They are quite valuable and something that we can put into practice. But we can put into practice principles in such a way where it's like we remember them as bullet points, they come to our mind, and then that invokes action on our part. There's another way where those principles become a part of the way that we think and perceive all things in life. And so the discernment and judgment that we have is fully inclusive of this way in action and not just a principled moment. And those are people that are very torn because principled moments come and go, but life, the regular part of life goes on and on. And it is where it is in your bedroom, it is in your time alone, it is with those who you share intimacy with and relationship, and it is in the midst of the whole. It's everything in life. And those then don't become principles. They become the sources from which we think and say and do in life. And so always be thinking when we go through some of these Analects how that there's a certain aspect of this that you don't put into practice cognitively. So we try to have some level of cognitive understanding and maybe imagination of how it applies in our life in various situations. But it is our heart toward it. So David was said to have a heart after God's heart. And I think that the majority of that meaning there is in pursuance of. And so he practiced the law and he meditated on the law. And he wanted to apply the law where he could in honor and reverence to God. But something in the inner man of David was being woven together with the essence of the nature and character of God. And so it was in that place that his meditations, what we can see in the Psalms of David and the experiences of David in his life, drew out something wholly from his man. There was no division in it. So, anyway, I don't know how to explain that much more than that. except to say that there are certain aspects of spiritual reality and truth that you can't just simply take hold of on your own and think that you're putting into practice. It comes from some other place beyond your mental capacity and intellectual ability and cognitive conscience. It's something beyond your thought process. If any of you guys want to add to that, that's fine. Maybe that'll be helpful for discussion.
That's exactly what I was trying to explain to you on Thursday when we met.
Yeah.
I've been being taught recently. I don't know if I can put it much better than you have.
It's
but
quite indirect, yeah.
a lot of it has been me. There's like a balance, because I think it's almost like to liken it to something else, a concept similar, the Wu Wei, the trying not to try. There's a balance to that where, there is a lot of reality in letting go of those things, but simultaneously it doesn't just mean don't try. It doesn't just mean, oh, okay, well, I'm going to put this in the Lord's hands, but what that actually means is I don't care and I'm not going to do anything about it. There's like a heart posture you have, it's like an active letting go, not like a just letting go because I don't care. I don't know, but that's
a giving over of a part of yourself that is there, but you don't have much control of. You know what I mean? Like, we can control our thoughts to a certain extent, and our actions, our words, those come from cognition, But there's a part of us, that's I don't know. It is the part that is activated in faith, and it doesn't have to understand. So we're able to give that over before our mind is willing to, in a sense. And what's really amazing about that is when you do that, then what's produced from that changes your mind. So I heard just a testimony the other day. It was recording, but it was some guy, who was an unbeliever, and he had heard the message of the gospel, and he just wasn't convinced, and he was kind of frustrated that that he was being told something in a certain way, like, you need to change your ways, right? And he had read the Bible, but he was frustrated enough where he really wanted to, for himself, for his own self, just disprove the truth. And so he'd look in the scriptures and whatever else, and he just wrestled with it so much. And at one point he spoke to God, and he was like, I don't know what the deal is, but he said, if my primary issue is selfishness, then I can at least recognize that I'm a selfish person. And so, I can consent to that. I agree. I am a selfish person. And then he said, in fact, with full intention to continue his disproof of this truth and reality at work, and he said he opened up the Bible again, and he said, someone messed with my book. Because he read it completely differently. You see, so there's something in the inner man that gave up, and everything changed. So it wasn't, his cognitive man was really working hard at something, but that other part of him repented. And it was that act of laying down in repentance that changed his mind. It wasn't understanding and convincing and intellectual interpretation and argument. That's why I'm not much of a fan of what the modern day apologist does by running to and fro in front of crowds and on college campuses to argue what they call defending the faith. I've never seen anyone change their heart that way. But when the heart is changed, the mind changes. It's amazing. So, and this does apply very much to the inner governance of a person's life, and how we can then produce, not with our hands or with the force of our mouth and words, a culture, a way of, that is quite different from, and quite unique in mankind, because it has been so little observed. But it is this governance, this way, and I'm not pointing at this book, I'm talking about the kingdom, that will come to be seen in this earth, or in the created order, once the sons of God have manifest. And the coming of the light of the glory, that says the light will shine on them like the noonday sun. They will come as a light in the darkness. Will be much like that, what was happening in mankind, but to a far greater extent during the period of the Enlightenment, coming out of the Dark Ages. If you take an overview of man's history, something dramatically changed in the way that man thought, and that actually produced it was like a twofold thing, because man's mind became enlightened, but his spirit was even more darkened through this enlightenment that happened. And now, that's the time prophesied by Isaiah, that there are people walking in great darkness, and they will see a light. And so God has appointed certain times for that light to shine, and it has been in increasing measures. So anyway, I won't belabor the topic much more unless you guys have other things to share. No? Okay, 14:7. Naomi, if you'll read the first part, and Jaden the second part.
The master said, "If you really care for them, can you then fail to put them to work? If you are really dutiful to him, can you then fail to instruct him?"
The first half of this passage concerns the duties of the ruler towards his people. If he genuinely cares for them, he will also make demands of them and urge them on in their work. The second concerns the duties of the minister, who displays his true dutifulness to his Lord by remonstrating and instructing when his Lord has done something wrong. To instruct others in goodness is what it means to be dutiful. As Mr. Sue comments, caring for them without putting them to work is the kind of care one shows to livestock. Being dutiful without instructing is the kind of dutifulness displayed by a wife or a eunuch. Only care that also involves putting them to work can be considered true, profound care. And only dutifulness that also involves instruction can be considered true, great dutifulness.
So there are two ways of viewing people. There's two aspects to this Analect. One is to the people, one is for ministers toward rulers. But then it's broken down again, and there are basically two ways of viewing and or not just viewing as if you're looking at them in a certain way, but of the relationship between a ruler and people. what's the differentiation there between the two ways of looking at the people?
You're referring to the either treating them like livestock or treating them like a wife or a eunuch.
Mm-hmm.
It's a eunuch.
A eunuch is like a servant, but is unable to reproduce. A eunuch is a male, so it's like a male servant that has, in most cases, had the ability to reproduce taken from him, and not necessarily as a punishment, but as a means of a life of service. So a eunuch would not have a family.
Like one way you could say the difference is outlined here is in caring or being dutiful to someone to maintain them as they are, to tend to them as they are, versus caring for someone or being dutiful to them to enable them to become what they can be, what they are destined to be. So it's a bit of a difference between sustaining one form of life versus urging someone from one form of life to another, which is what I think you could see true care or true dutifulness as being. Because when you have livestock, you're basically just trying to keep them healthy, keep them as they are, for what is ultimately a selfish end, because maybe they'll be slaughtered later or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone like a wife or eunuch is just kind of attending to the needs of. Well, true care would be, as it says, putting someone or putting them to work. So that's enabling them to. It would seem as if that's going against what it looks like to care for somebody, but that's actually allowing them to sustain themselves, even be able to put into practice maybe what they have learned. So it's an enablement. That's what I see putting them to work as opposed to just being nurtured as far as their needs being met. Putting to work is like an enablement. Well, and then
the wife and eunuch is connected to the care of a ruler, and the livestock is connected to the care of the people.
Yeah,
So you're bringing them together. I was just making that differentiation because
I was getting to the dutiful. Yeah, the care has to do with the example of the livestock and people,
Mm-hmm.
and then dutifulness. Again, it's still kind of as a wife and eunuch would. It's still kind of attending to the needs of. While true dutifulness, as it says, is knowing when and how to instruct. So that's again it seems to go against what care or what dutifulness looks like, because you in dutifulness you think of someone that is faithful to the meeting of needs. But dutifulness in this sense is is knowing where someone can be, the process of becoming that they're participating in, and working towards that end for a person and in a person.
I have I guess a question with the wording of this. So it says, if you really care for them, can you then fail to put them to work? But then it says, if you are really dutiful to him, can you then fail to instruct him? So is that second part referring to the ones being instructed in being dutiful to the one who gave the work?
So again, remember that the conversations that are being had here are between Confucius and his students,
Mm-hmm.
and many of his students are in ministerial roles in houses of leadership.
Okay. So right, so this
So
is
the
like a
hymn-
second in command situation. Okay, I'm
Yes.
following.
So in their position of being dutiful to a ruler,
Mhm.
they should instruct him.
I'm
So there's been
following
some
now.
other Analects, basically you also have to be discerning as to whether that person can receive
Mhm.
instruction,
Okay.
right?
That gives me
That-
more context.
Some of the context there.
Yeah, so it's you're in a second command position where you have people that you move over and a person that is above you, but that you are offering guidance and counsel to. That makes
Mhm.
sense. Okay, I can put this into
The
context a
them,
little better.
the them
now.
is the people and the him is the ruler. The correlation of the people to livestock is if he says if he genuinely cares for them, he will make demands of them and urge them on in their work. So we have to understand why this is wisdom. You need to understand the perspective that Confucius is saying should be had in relation to the people. So if you view the people as livestock or as consumables, basically what they can give to you versus what you can all do together. See, there's a huge difference. And so, like Noah said, there's the livestock view is a maintenance of until a certain end is met. But if your ministration over those people is the betterment of all, and that's the encouragement that you are giving them, and that's why you don't want them to simply be idle. You wouldn't just say, we have plenty in this kingdom, let's just live it out. Let people do their own thing. No, you would always be saying, how are we developing as a people, as a nation, with our infrastructure, with our, the storehouses, all those things. Again, remember that when, King David was very much an infrastructure guy. And even to compare David to Saul, do you remember Saul he had won some battle, I can't remember who it was. I don't think it was the Philistines, it was the Midianites or something.
One of the ites.
But he took over their fortress and lived in their fortress. David, however, was he was a builder, and so he took over lands and built on top of lands, and then he wanted to build the house for the Lord. He had built his own palace, so he liked construction in one sense, right? And but he was, by the time that Solomon completed the temple, the Jerusalem and the surrounding area of the nation was kind of a wonder of the world, okay? And not just because they had this high and glorious temple. The rulers of the world, Queen of Sheba being an example, wanted to come to understand. So there's always two examples that I mentioned from something that's more recent that we may remember. One is in The Chosen. Remember when Matthew comes and Quintus has some relative visiting, and he's like, he was given this position of a high position of honor, and like he's coming unannounced to my town here in Capernaum or wherever he's at, and he's like, how would you show him whatever? And Matthew says, show him your infrastructure, show him your plans of how you manage the city, because that's something worthy of like considering a good accomplishment. Remember last week we looked, or a couple weeks ago we looked at that Analect that said, oh, here's two great warriors, and man, they were incredible people, and they did these great feats, accomplished great things even for the people that were with them, but they died in war or however. And then you have these sage rulers, in a sense, or ministers, who ministered to the people, and one conquered the Yellow River, so he created channels and canals, some of which are still in use today in 2025. So there was some investment that was made that lasted literally thousands of years and has affected millions and millions of people's lives in a positive way for the provision, for the infrastructure that was put in place there. So who really did the greater work? It's pretty obvious, right? That doesn't necessarily take away from the momentary renown, but it's a different way of thinking about what actually has a greater impact on peoples and nations. And so here, again, we're taking that mindset and saying the people need to be put to work. It's not about lording over them or treating them as lessers or slaves, but that they can all enjoy. And this has been in other Analects too. Put them to work. Let them see the fruit of the labor of their hands, not just for their own provision, but for what you are becoming as a people. That's the mindset that's being... Otherwise, what are you doing? Well, they're just consumables. They're livestock. Well, we're going to give them what they need, and then they'll give us what we need. It's very narrow-minded. It's not looking down the road. It's not looking at what's ahead. It's not looking 1,000 years away. Do you think 1,000 years away? No way you do. You're having a hard time thinking 5 years away in your life. Because it's about, what am I going to get? Where am I going to go? Who am I going to be with? What am I going to have? You got to change that mindset. Your life will come and go. And what we do, and let's translate this into the internal realm, what we do in this life, and we should be, read again in this context, Hebrews 11. Those who lived their entire life, traveled as aliens and sojourners on this earth, all looking for something that was going to be fully established and put in place in an order and an operation. And they knew they had faith. They knew that that's what God was doing. They knew that's the master plan. And they lived their life in faith according to that blueprinted master plan, even though they didn't see it come to fruition. There's no other way to live a life of faith, you guys. And there's no other way to properly put the governance of God's kingdom into, or to live it out as an active reality in your life, unless you live with that view in mind. You can't. That's the only context that its true power and authority operates in. And that's why we've seen what seems to be little progress over a millennia as it pertains to the coming of that end or accomplished purpose of God for his people. Because generation after generation lives to the ends of their own, by the means of their own ends, rather than the greater ends that God has put in place. It's a much higher vision. And you need to have that. See, when you're in high school, and then sometimes when you have business meetings in the corporate world and whatever else, or you're interviewing for a job at a corporation or whatever, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Okay, all personal view. What about, where do you see humanity in 1,000 years? And how are we living in such a way as to have an impact on that? It's a very different view. But it can be encouraged very practically. You don't have to be floating in some cloud somewhere to be thinking that far off. But you need to be putting it into an active practice of the way that you do things. So that's about mindsets and perspectives. So don't treat people that way. Treat people in such a way that they can do things together. that's why a nation like China has such a long, united history. It's because a vast majority of them began to think, at least in that way, in some manner. And they were accomplishing great feats. I mean, they some of the great wonders of the world there. But what I'm saying is, in reference to David and Solomon, is what those other rulers of the world came to see was, how do you do things? Not just how much gold do you have piled up, how many chariots do you have, how many swords can you count, how many layers of gold are on your shields. Wow. I mean, they had all those things in uncountable measures. Okay, so that is something awful. But what they were really interested in was, how did this come to be? How did you make that happen? And that was because there was a lot of building up for it. And so that actually became a great measure of disparity between, and this is what caused a huge division in the kingdom after Solomon. Because Solomon's work on the temple was extremely taxing on the people. They worked hard to do that. And so when his son Rehoboam came to leadership, and the elders that worked with Solomon said, we've worked really hard for this to come to this place of fulfillment and infrastructural place, and let's be careful not to treat the people too harshly. So there was another side of that, and that's what Rehoboam's father's elders. So as Solomon is in his age, and he has actually begun to fail in certain moral aspects of his life and otherwise, but he still has advisors and others around him. Those same advisors came to the younger Rehoboam and said, you need to be careful about how you go forward with this. Well, Rehoboam received that, but then he turned to his younger friends, his peers, as advisors, and said, well, no, if you're not going to get anywhere being nice to the people, you need to work them harder than your father did. And so, Rehoboam, when he came into rulership, actually went out and said, if you thought my dad was hard, I'm going to be 10 times harder on you. And that created a huge rift in the people. And that was the kingdom was divided between the north and south at that point. And then there were further divisions that took place as well. So you can see that the subtleties of these wisdoms applied in a practical manner have very dramatic impacts on peoples. That impacted an entire nation. And so this perspective, he's saying, there's a balance here. And this is on the other side of it, where you would not want to have the people idle and just simply giving you what you need, just paying their taxes. No, then they need to be a part of the progress so that they can have a part in it. Because then they own that more, right? And they're a greater participant in what this kingdom is, what this place is. And by means of a ruling area or sphere, because they participated in it. And so, anyway, I've exhausted that enough. Now looking at the other side with the ruler, where he says, if you're really dutiful to him, can you fail to instruct him? So remonstrating and instructing, this is actually a little bit more familiar subject because it's been in a couple previous Analects as well. But that's what it means to be truly dutiful, to perform fully your duties in that place. is to engage with that ruler in such a way, and along with that engagement comes there's a necessity of discernment as to what kind of person this ruler is, whether or not they will willingly remonstrate with you and receive instruction from you. And if you see that secondary one enhances the ability and capacity of that ruler to do a greater work for the whole. And then that in turn comes back through the minister in the way that he engages with the people. Any other thoughts?
I don't know why, but the way you described the mastering of the Yellow River example just clicked with me for the first time. So thanks for explaining that.
That one's been sticking with me a couple weeks now. It's a pretty.
I don't know. I think that's something I was like feeling guilty about because I didn't know what that actually looked like practically. But I don't know. That just clicked in a different way now. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Elijah, will you read 14:8 and Isaac the second part?
The master said, in preparing diplomatic orders, the Chan of the East Village would have Bichen to go into the country and draft it. Shishu critique and discuss it. The foreign ministers you edit and ornament it. And then finally, the Chan himself would mark it with his own unique style.
Sejong was a prime minister, Zagain, a man much admired by Confucius. Zhang was a small state surrounded by much more powerful neighbors, but it managed to survive because of its skillful diplomacy of its ministers. The point is thus similar to 4:11 and 14:19. A good ruler or minister is one who understands the character and skills of others and is able to employ them wisely. As Lu comments, actor and skills of others is able to employ them. Oh wait, I'm just messed up.
This passage.
Yeah. This passage uses the example of Zhagong's preparation of diplomatic orders in order to illustrate the value of precision and caution when it comes to affairs, as well as the effectiveness of finding the right people and properly employing them. Where various ministers allow an unworthy ruler to maintain his position.
So in reference to 14:19, where virtuous ministers allow an unworthy ruler to maintain his position. I was just thinking that it's interesting that you have these three different almost like areas that are sent in, because Bachin is sent into the country and Shishu is to critique and discuss it, and then the foreign minister is to edit and ornament it. So each one of these individuals has very different perspectives on, and you can imagine that when they go on to the country, he's drafting it in the midst of the people, yeah? And so then that has come back to another man who applies some other discernment and application to that, and then the foreign minister, and this I think is in reference to what he says there, this Jing area had very powerful neighbors, but so how were they able to last so long? Well, you can see that when they would prepare these diplomatic orders and orders, what kind of governmental decisions are we going to make that impact our area and the area around us? Well, we're going to go check that out first. We're going to really do diligence here to understand our people and the people around us, and then discuss this and along the lines of what are all the nuances of this diplomatic order. Who will it affect? What consequences will it have? How will people respond? How will our neighbors respond to such a thing? So, somebody look up the definition of diplomacy so you can better understand the process that's going here.
The profession, activity, or skill of managing international relations, typically by countries' representatives abroad.
Yeah, so again, the context is you have this smaller governed area that has larger governed areas around it. How did they last? And even some of the larger governed areas didn't. Well, because they were very careful about how they interacted with their neighbors. And they did that in the, not just the consensus necessarily, but with the inclusion of a discernment that included the whole. So this wasn't a democracy, obviously. They weren't casting votes and seeing who thought it would be best to do what, but they knew the heartbeat of the people, and they knew the tenor of their neighbors. And so they would then interact with them in this way that would create what would in essence be some protection for and the longevity of their little ruling state, the state of Jin. And so, anytime that you see someone that is admired by Confucius, you want to just not look at what they did, but how they did what they did. What were the nature of their relationships? How did they interact with others? How did they view their own people? If he was admired by Confucius, then he was considered to be a good ruler and a wise man. And so, it would be then, Zishan, or however you say his name, would be probably a good character to do some study on. If you could find some historical reference to his life, almost like a what would you call that, a biography, or whatever history there is about him and his raising and his time of rule and things like that, because you would probably see some very interesting things about how he governed and made decisions and interacted with others in various areas and roles in his life, whether that be family, friends, professional, diplomatic, or otherwise. Anyway, I don't know if it's possible to do that, but that might be an interesting little...
I don't want Wikipedia.
Oh yeah?
Is that what he looks like? I've seen that face before. I know that.
It looks similar to that Confucius.
Yeah, they all look the same.
I mean, but
In a
that's,
sketch anyway.
no, I've seen that outside of the Confucius thing. I've seen that image somewhere. That exact painting. That's funny.
John faced aggression from powerful neighbors without, and fractious domestic politics within. He was a political leader at the time, and Chinese culture and society was enduring a century-long period of turbulence. Governing traditions had become unstable and malleable. Institutions were being battered by chronic war, and new forms of state leadership were emerging, but were sharply contested. Under Zhang, the Zheng state prospered. He introduced reforms with strengthened and which strengthened the state and met foreign threats. His statecraft was respected by his peers and reportedly appreciated by the people. Favorably treated in the Zhochuan, an ancient text of history, Shan drew comments from his near contemporary Confucius, later from Mencius and Hefei.
Doesn't say much about his personal life, but
Well, it's Wikipedia.
Also full of typos.
I know. What in the world was that?
Not really a scholastic website, unfortunately.
well, like Michael Scott said.
Oh, is that The Office?
Yeah.
What did he say?
I love Wikipedia.
Oh,
Anyone can get on there and just say anything about anything. So you just know it's right.
Yeah.
I think they tried to do better with their sourcing, but
In high school, my friends really loved just going to the Wikipedia on bread and changing every single word to bread. And
Oh, no.
They did that enough times, I think they got their like IP banned from the website.
oh my goodness.
But they thought it was really, really funny at the time.
Any other thoughts here?
I found another thing is better. I can send it to everyone. I mean, it's a pretty. Anyone wants to read it? It's a little bit more detailed.
Oh,
Well,
that's
we got a few minutes.
That's
Let me
got
see.
a lot of Chinese text in it.
Well, it's pretty long. I'll send it to you.
No, have you ever heard him mentioned in that book from Mencius you're going through?
I can't remember.
I don't know, the Wikipedia article said Mencius.
I thought it was when I first read over. I thought it was Zhuan, but it's not the same guy.
Oh, that article is a different guy?
No, it's. I thought I was referring to another character in this book, but it's not
Oh,
the
I see,
same.
I see.
Zichan, is that how you say his name?
Zhuan, yeah.
Was a high minister of the state of Jin during the late spring and autumn period.
Chunqiu.
His personal name was
Ji Qiang.
Ji Tiao, and he was the grandson of Duke Mu. Is that how you say it?
Duke Mu of Zhang.
Mu Zhang. And
Zhang.
son of Duke Cheng.
Zhang.
Zhang Cheng. For which reason he is also called ducal grandson. Wow.
What?
Gong Sun Qiao.
That's Gong Sun Qiao.
Hey, I said it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's how you say ducal grandson. Okay. He was a member of the House of Guo,
Guo.
one of the 7 houses of Zheng. In 565, Sichuan's father, Prince
She's Fa.
Fa.
Gong Si Fa.
Gong Sifa, I love it, had successfully led a campaign.
Against Cai.
Cai?
Cai.
Oh, cool. But sorry, this is very broken up reading. But he warned that success would probably incite the states of Chu.
True. You got it. Go what you got.
Oh, okay, Chu. In the south and Jin in the north, to press upon Zheng from 2 sides. Shortly after, Fa was assassinated by some envious nobles in Dukjiang and was forced to retire. Sichuan prepared a backslow that was successfully conducted. Prince Jia, the new regent, proclaimed a new law strengthening the central government against which nobles rebelled. Sichuan suggested the prince, I'm just getting overworded here, suggested the prince openly burning the law in order to appease the rebels. When Prince Jia was assassinated in 554, Sichuan was appointed minister under the pressure of the state of Jin. Sichuan tried to keep a balance between obedience and resistance without giving up suzerainty. What is that? The suzerainty of Zheng.
What I misrespond?
Position of control. Sovereign state. In a campaign against Qin, Sishan exhibited a generous treatment of the defeated troops of Qin. So here's one place where you can see the way that he dealt with diplomatic things. So in earlier times, it would have been very common to torture, slaughter, imprison, enslave, whatever else, but he has a very generous treatment of troops. When the army of Chu attacked to conquer the small state of Shu, Sishan relied on a tactic of defense which brought the commander of Chu a feeling of success and made him return without encroaching on the territory of Zheng. In 543, a deathly quarrel among the princes endangered? I would say endangered, but that's a funny word. Endangered. I think it's probably endangered, it's a typo. Endangered the ducal house, but Sishan, whom they wanted to kill, boldly resisted the rebel. You guys should be reading this along with me so I don't just sound like a babbling fool. Boldly resisted the rebels and was supported by the army. Without him, the state of Zheng would not anymore exist, was the argument of his supporters. In a dangerous time, Sishan was able to defend the suzerainty, the sovereignty, of the state of Zheng against two larger powers, and at the same time managed to save the ducal house from internal quarrels. With a right sense for the weakness and strengths, he curbed the powerful families and saved the central government by a series of legal reforms he successfully enforced. And I think this is in reference to what he did. He had these three men that worked with him, and he would send one out, he would have another edit, and then he would have another finalized so that they could have a very diplomatic approach and have everybody's understanding. So he curbed the powerful families and saved the central government by a series of legal reforms he successfully enforced. Sishan and the new law code cast into a bronze vessel that was presented in public. Interesting. So that's actually this law, because see, he says he finally, Ziyu would edit and ornament it so it was put on a certain type of casting to be memorialized, and then Sishan himself would mark it with his own unique style. I think that is not only the formation of it, but the verbiage too. And that was then presented to the public. Confucius admired him as a representative of the old nobility that had still kind-heartedness and benevolence in their minds. There you go. There's a couple of them. Primary attributes. Kind-heartedness and benevolence, even to your enemy. When a fire blaze had destroyed a part of the land, the Duke wanted to undergo expensive sacrificial offerings. But Sishan admonished him to exert a more virtuous government. There's another person with the name of Sishan. His personal name is Ranji. Anyway, there was another one that was actually counted among the disciples of Confucius. Anyway, interesting character insight there with some, primary character points, his kind-heartedness and benevolence, which was played out in the way that he treated others, not just personally, but as a ruler, as one who carried authority. So, okay. Well, we will end there today. Kayla, will you close us in prayer?
I'd love to. Father, I thank you for this time that we get to have in community with one another. I thank you for the subjects that you are leading us over, and I pray that we would continuously learn how to rid ourselves of our flesh. Lord, as we have said multiple times, that we don't want to live our lives for ourselves. But Lord, I
I pray that you would hold us to the standard we have asked for. And I pray that we would mean what we say and not just say things because we know that they are good and what someone might want to hear. Father, I ask that we would be more open to share with one another and ask questions. I thank you so much for this season that you are bringing us up into. I pray that we would be aware and not take this time lightly. I thank you for Tim and the time that he has set apart to help us grow in you, Lord. I thank you for his patience with us and your patience with us, Lord. I pray that you would, we would continue to follow in your direction. And I just pray that our hearts would be full for the rest of the day. Amen.
Amen.